She thought the message would save her family. Instead, it became the door to her own destruction. When Priya Sharma opened Instagram that Tuesday evening in her cramped Mumbai apartment, she had no idea that the verified account glowing on her screen would lead her halfway across the world and into a nightmare disguised as a dream. The profile picture showed a golden crest. The username read official_prince_Khalid. The message was simple, professional, almost too good to be real. We've reviewed your profile and believe you would be an excellent candidate for a private position within our organization. Please respond if interested in discussing further. Priya stared at the words until they blurred. She read them again, then a third time. Her hands were shaking. This wasn't a scam message full of broken English and empty promises. This was clean, formal, direct. She clicked on the profile. Verified blue checkmark, 40,000 followers. Photos of polo matches at Golden Hour Estates. Charity galas with men in crisp thobes and women in couture gowns. A caption in Arabic and English about education initiatives in East Africa. Everything looked real. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked like a life she would never touch. She was 26 years old and exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Every morning she woke at 5:30 to the sound of her mother's cough in the next room, a wet, rattling sound that had been getting worse since the monsoon. She made chai in the tiny kitchen of their two-room apartment in Andheri, a neighborhood where buildings pressed against each other like passengers on the Western Line. She worked as a marketing coordinator for a pharmaceutical company, a job that paid her 28,000 rupees a month and demanded 50-hour weeks. On weekends, she did freelance social media consulting for small businesses, managing their Instagram accounts, writing captions, scheduling posts. She needed the extra money. They always needed more money. Her father had died 3 years earlier after a stroke that came without warning and left them drowning in medical debt. He'd been a clerk at a government office, steady and kind, the sort of man who believed that hard work and honesty would eventually lead to stability. He'd been wrong. The hospital bills consumed his life insurance and their savings. Priya's younger sister Anjali was still in college, studying commerce, dreaming of an MBA she probably wouldn't be able to afford. Their mother had stopped talking about her own health because there was no money left for doctors. Priya carried all of it: the rent, the groceries, Anjali's tuition, the electricity bill, the debt collectors who called on the first of every month. She was beautiful in a way she'd stopped noticing. Tall for an Indian woman, with dark eyes and high cheekbones and hair she kept in a practical braid because she didn't have time for anything else. Men looked at her on the train. She looked through them. She had no energy left for romance or distraction. She had her mother's cough and her sister's tuition and the weight of being the eldest daughter in a family that had no safety net. And now this. A message from a Saudi prince, or someone claiming to be one. She didn't respond immediately. She wasn't naive. She'd heard stories about job scams, trafficking schemes, promises of work abroad that ended in exploitation, but curiosity gnawed at her. She clicked through the profile again. The photos looked professional, not stolen from Google Images. The followers included verified accounts of journalists, diplomats, minor celebrities. The captions were thoughtful, not generic. She searched the name, Prince Khalid bin Rahman. A few articles appeared in Arabic publications about charitable foundations and business investments. Nothing major, but enough to suggest he was real. She drafted a response 3 times before sending it. Thank you for reaching out. Could you provide more details about the position? She hit send before she could overthink it. The reply came within minutes. Of course. My assistant Layla will contact you via video call tomorrow at 6 p.m. your time to discuss the opportunity in detail. Please ensure you're available. A phone number followed. WhatsApp. Priya screenshotted everything and sent it to her best friend Neha with a string of question marks. Neha called immediately. This is either amazing or a scam. There's no in between. They talked through it, weighing possibilities, analyzing the profile, searching for red flags. They found none. Not yet. Neha told her to take the call, but be careful. Don't give out personal information. Don't agree to anything without research. Priya promised she wouldn't. But even as she said it, she felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope. The next evening, she locked herself in the bedroom she shared with Anjali and waited. At exactly 6 p.m., the WhatsApp call came through. The woman on the screen was elegant and polished, maybe 40, with perfect English and an accent that sounded vaguely British. She introduced herself as Layla Mansour, senior recruiter for the prince's private office. She wore a cream blouse and minimal jewelry. Behind her was a tasteful office with diplomas on the wall. Priya, thank you for taking the time to speak with me, she began. I'll be direct. Prince Khalid is expanding his team of international professionals. He values education, discretion, and cultural intelligence. Your background in marketing and your language skills make you an ideal candidate for a role as his personal assistant and cultural liaison. Priya's throat went dry. I'm sorry, I think there's been a mistake. I don't have experience working with high-profile clients or, you're exactly what we're looking for, Layla interrupted gently. The prince doesn't want someone who's been conditioned by years in traditional corporate environments. He wants fresh perspective, intelligence, adaptability. We've reviewed hundreds of profiles. Yours stood out. The flattery felt like sunlight on skin that had been cold too long. Layla explained the role. Priya would manage the prince's communications, coordinate his schedule, liaise with international contacts, and assist with social initiatives. The salary was $15,000 per month. Housing would be provided in a luxury compound in Riyadh. Travel when required, full benefits. A 2-year contract with renewal options. Priya did the math in her head. $15,000 was over 12 lakh rupees per month. She currently made $33,000. This was more than she would earn in 3 years. This was enough to pay off every debt, fund Anjali's MBA, get her mother proper medical care, and still have enough left to breathe. I know it sounds too good to be true, Layla said, reading her expression. That's a normal reaction. But the prince values his staff and believes in compensating them appropriately. This is a serious professional opportunity, Priya. I wouldn't waste your time otherwise. They talked for 40 minutes. Layla answered every question with patience and detail. She described Riyadh, the compound, the work culture, the expectations. She sent documents during the call, an employment contract on letterhead with an embossed seal, a non-disclosure agreement, a welcome packet with photos of the accommodations. Everything looked legitimate. Everything looked real. I'll need to think about it, Priya said finally. This is a big decision. Of course, Layla replied. Take 48 hours. But I should mention we're interviewing other candidates as well. The prince is hoping to make a decision by the end of the week. The gentle pressure was there, subtle but unmistakable. Don't wait too long. This opportunity won't last. After the call ended, Priya sat in silence, her heart hammering. Anjali knocked and came in, asking what happened. Priya showed her everything. The contract, the salary, the photos of the luxury apartment with marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Riyadh skyline. Anjali's eyes went wide. Didi, this is insane. This could change everything. Their mother was more cautious. She listened to Priya explain the offer, her face unreadable. Saudi Arabia is far, she said quietly, and you'd be alone. I'd visit, Priya said, and I'd send money home every month. Real money, Amma. Enough to fix everything. Her mother looked at her for a long moment, and Priya saw the exhaustion there, the years of struggling and sacrificing. If you think it's safe, her mother said finally, then I trust you. Priya spent the next 2 days researching obsessively. She searched for the prince's name, found articles, cross-referenced details. She looked up the recruiting company listed on the contract. She even paid for a background check service online. Everything came back clean. No red flags, no warnings. Layla called again, this time introducing her briefly to a man who claimed to be the prince's chief of staff, a crisp-voiced administrator who confirmed the details and welcomed her to the team if she chose to accept. Nihai remained skeptical. Just be careful, Priya. People can fake anything these days. But even Neha couldn't find anything wrong with the offer, and the money was undeniable, life-changing, family-saving. Priya made her decision. She called Layla and accepted the position. The response was immediate and warm. Welcome to the team, Priya. You've made an excellent choice. We'll begin processing your visa and travel arrangements immediately. Everything moved quickly after that. Layla sent instructions for passport copies, medical tests, visa photos. She arranged for a courier to pick up documents. She sent regular updates via WhatsApp, always professional, always reassuring. The visa was approved in a week, expedited through the prince's connections. The flight was booked, business class. Priya had never flown business class in her life. She gave notice at her job. Her manager was shocked, but wished her well. She told her friends who were equal parts excited and worried. She packed her suitcase with the few professional clothes she owned and the new outfits her mother insisted on buying with borrowed money. Her mother cried the night before she left, holding Priya's face in her hands. Promise me you'll call every day, she whispered. Priya promised. Anjali helped her pack, folding clothes carefully, chattering nervously about how Priya would come back rich and sophisticated, and how they'd finally be able to move to a bigger apartment. "You're going to have the most incredible life, Didi," she said. "I'm so proud of you." The morning of her flight, Priya stood in the tiny apartment and looked around. The peeling paint, the cramped kitchen, the balcony overlooking a street loud with horns and vendors. She was leaving all of it behind. She was stepping into something bigger, something that felt like destiny. Her mother hugged her at the door. Anjali took a selfie with her, smiling wide. Priya got into the taxi and watched them wave from the window until the car turned the corner. At the airport, she checked in and made her way through security. She texted Layla that she was boarding. The response came immediately. "Safe travels, Priya. A driver will meet you at arrivals in Riyadh, looking forward to welcoming you." Priya settled into her seat, the leather soft and expensive. The flight attendant offered her champagne. She accepted, sipping it slowly, feeling like she was already living a different life. But as the plane taxied toward the runway, she noticed something small, a detail she'd overlooked. The employment contract listed an address in Riyadh, but when she tried to search it on Google Maps during her research, nothing came up, just a blank stretch of road on the city's outskirts. She'd meant to ask Layla about it but had forgotten in the rush of preparations. She thought about texting now, but her phone was switching to airplane mode. She told herself it didn't matter. New developments didn't always show up on maps immediately. Wealthy compounds were often private, unlisted for security reasons. It was fine. Everything was fine. She pushed the thought away as the plane lifted into the sky, Mumbai shrinking below her, and told herself she was flying toward a dream. Not a cage, not a trap, a dream. She had no idea how wrong she was. The city below her looked like a carpet of diamonds spread across black velvet. Riyadh at night was nothing like Mumbai. No chaos, no colors bleeding into each other, no humanity spilling into every visible inch. Just clean lines of light, geometric and cold, stretching toward a darkness that seemed absolute. Priya pressed her face to the window as the plane descended, her stomach tight with anticipation and something else she couldn't name. Excitement, she told herself. Just excitement. The airport was massive and gleaming, all white marble and gold accents. She moved through immigration with her new work visa, and the officer barely glanced at her before stamping her passport. She collected her suitcase and walked toward arrivals, scanning the crowd for a driver holding her name. Instead, she saw two men in traditional white thobes standing near the exit. One of them stepped forward when he saw her. "Priya Sharma?" he asked in accented English. She nodded. He didn't smile. "Come." They took her suitcase without asking and walked toward the parking area. Priya followed, trying to match their pace, suddenly aware of how alone she was. The airport was full of people, but no one looked at her. No one seemed to notice. The men led her to a black SUV with tinted windows. One of them opened the back door. "Passport," he said, holding out his hand. Priya hesitated. "I need it for processing. Work permit registration, you get back tomorrow." His tone left no room for argument. She handed it over, watching as he slipped it into a folder. They drove in silence. She tried to make conversation at first, asking about the city, the compound, when she would meet the prince. The driver answered in clipped monosyllables or didn't answer at all. After 20 minutes, she stopped trying. She looked out the window instead, watching Riyadh pass by. Sleek buildings gave way to highways, then to sprawling developments, then to something sparser. Older neighborhoods, construction sites, empty lots. They were driving away from the city center, not toward it. "Where is the compound?" she asked. "Close," the driver said. They drove for another 30 minutes. The roads became narrower, the streetlights fewer. Priya's unease grew with every kilometer. This didn't look like where luxury apartments would be. This looked like the outskirts of nowhere. Finally, they turned onto a private road. High walls appeared on both sides, topped with security cameras that swiveled as they passed. A gate opened ahead of them, heavy and automated. They drove through. The compound was large, she'd give it that. Sprawling. A main house stood at the center, modern and angular, with lights glowing behind frosted glass. Smaller buildings flanked it. Gardens, or what might have been gardens, stretched into darkness. But something about it felt wrong. The beauty was sterile. The quiet too complete. The driver stopped in front of a side entrance. "Come," he said again. Priya got out. The air was warm and dry, carrying the faint scent of jasmine and exhaust. One of the men took her suitcase. The other gestured for her to follow him inside. The interior was beautiful in the way expensive hotels are beautiful. Marble floors, ornate light fixtures, furniture that looked unused. But there was no warmth, no personality. They led her down a hallway and stopped at a door. The man unlocked it with a key and pushed it open. "Your room. Rest tonight." Someone will come in the morning. He handed her the key and left before she could ask anything else. The door closed behind him. She heard the lock click. From the outside, Priya stood frozen for a moment, then rushed to the door and tried the handle. Locked. She knocked. "Excuse me? Hello?" "The door is locked." No response. She knocked harder. "I think there's been a mistake. The door won't open." Silence. Her heart started to beat faster. She pulled out her phone. No signal, not even one bar. She tried anyway, dialing Layla's number. The call wouldn't connect. She tried WhatsApp. Nothing. She walked to the window and looked out. Bars. Decorative. Wrought iron. Elegant even. But bars. She told herself not to panic. This was a security measure. A misunderstanding. They'd locked the door by accident. In the morning, someone would come and explain everything, and she'd feel foolish for being scared. She sat on the bed, expensive and firm, and tried to steady her breathing. The room was nice. A private bathroom with marble counters, a closet, a desk, a television mounted on the wall. Everything she'd been promised, except the locked door, except the barred window, except the silence that felt less like peace and more like isolation. She didn't sleep. She sat on the bed fully clothed, watching the door, waiting for morning. When light finally crept through the window, she heard footsteps in the hallway. A knock. The door unlocked. A woman stood there, maybe 30, wearing a plain dress and a tired expression. She spoke in English with a thick accent. "Breakfast. Come." Priya followed her down the hallway and into a dining area. 4 other women sat at the table. They looked up when Priya entered. Their faces told her everything. The woman who'd brought her gestured to an empty chair. Priya sat. No one spoke. Breakfast was simple. Bread, cheese, tea. Priya didn't touch it. She looked at the other women. One was Southeast Asian, slight and young. Another was African, older, with scars on her arms. The third looked Middle Eastern or North African. The fourth could have been from anywhere, her features ambiguous, her eyes hollow. "Where is Layla?" Priya asked. "Where is the prince?" I was told. "There is no prince," the African woman said quietly. Her voice was flat, resigned. "No Layla either. Not really, just Faisal." Priya's stomach dropped. "Who's Faisal?" "The man who owns this place. The man who brought you here." The woman's name was Amara. She was from Kenya. She'd been at the compound for 2 years. The others had been there for varying lengths of time, 6 months, a year, 18 months. All of them had come the same way Priya had. Job offers, promises of legitimate work, contracts that looked real, visas processed through connections, flights paid for, and then the trap closed. Faisal appeared an hour later. He was younger than Priya expected, maybe 40, wearing designer casual clothes and an expensive watch. He smiled when he saw her, warm and practiced. "Priya, welcome. I trust you slept well?" She stood. "I want my passport back. I want to leave. This isn't what I agreed to." His smile didn't waver. "I understand you're confused. Let me explain. The recruitment costs for your position were significant. Visa fees, flight, processing, agency commissions. These expenses total approximately $18,000 US. You'll work here to pay off this debt, and once it's cleared, you're free to go." "That's illegal," Priya said. "That's trafficking." "It's a contract," Faisal replied calmly. "You accepted the terms. You benefited from the services. Now you fulfill your obligation." "I never agreed to this. Your signature is on the paperwork. Your acceptance is documented. If you'd like to involve authorities, I'm happy to provide them with evidence of your contractual agreement. Of course, without your passport, you're currently in this country illegally. That could complicate things for you." The threat was delivered with a pleasant tone, almost friendly. Priya felt the room tilt. "You can't keep me here." "I'm not keeping you anywhere," Faisal said. "You're welcome to leave once your debt is settled. Until then, you'll work as household staff. Cleaning, cooking, serving guests. Simple tasks. You'll have food, shelter, safety." Many women would be grateful for such conditions. He left before she could respond. The door locked behind him. Priya turned to the other women. "We have to get out. We have to call someone." "With what phone?" Amara asked. "He took yours, didn't he? Gave you a new one that only works on his network?" Priya pulled out the phone she'd been using since landing. She hadn't questioned it when the driver handed it to her at the airport, saying her Indian phone wouldn't work, and this was a company device. She tried to dial out now, blocked. Only certain numbers were accessible, all of them internal. "The police," Priya started. Won't help, the Southeast Asian woman said. Her name was May. We're foreigners, no papers, no proof. He has connections. We tried. They sent us back. Priya spent the rest of that first day in a haze of disbelief. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to educated women with job offers and contracts. Except they did. Faisal had perfected the system. He targeted women from countries where $15,000 a month was life-changing. Women with families who needed help. Women desperate enough to overlook small inconsistencies. He used real-looking documents, professional recruiters, verified social media accounts, everything designed to bypass suspicion. The work began the next morning. Priya was woken at 5 and given a uniform. Plain, gray, shapeless. She was assigned to kitchen duty with May. They prepared breakfast for Faisal and his guests, men who came and went, wealthy and indifferent. Priya's hands shook as she chopped vegetables. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be her life. But it was. By the third day, the reality had settled into her bones. She was trapped. Her passport was locked in Faisal's office. Her phone was useless. The compound was surrounded by walls and cameras. The guards were loyal to Faisal and had no sympathy for foreign workers. The local authorities wouldn't help without documentation she didn't have. She tried to contact her family using the monitored phone, sending a message to her mother's number. It never went through. Deleted, she later learned, by Faisal's system. Any outgoing communication was filtered and blocked. Her mother and sister probably thought she was settling in, busy with her new job, living the dream. They had no idea. Faisal played the role of benevolent employer with disturbing ease. He provided meals, clean rooms, even small luxuries like toiletries and books. But he controlled everything: movement, communication, access. He framed it as protection, as structure, as the natural order of an employment arrangement. But it was captivity dressed in expensive packaging. The other women shared their stories in whispers during the few moments they had alone. Amara had been recruited as a nanny. May as a hotel worker. The others had similar tales. All had families depending on them. All had believed they were stepping into opportunity. All had walked into the same trap. Has anyone ever escaped? Priya asked one night. Amara looked at her carefully. 2 tried. 1 was caught at the gate. Faisal had her beaten by the guards and locked in a storage room for a week. The other made it to the main road. Police picked her up, no papers. They brought her back and Faisal filed a complaint for theft. She's still here, too scared to try again. Priya felt hope draining from her with each passing day. She worked 16-hour shifts. She scrubbed floors and served meals and disappeared into a numbness that felt safer than constant terror. Faisal watched her sometimes, studying her like she was a puzzle he was solving. You're adjusting well, he told her one evening. I knew you were smart. Smart women understand when resistance is pointless. She didn't respond. She learned that silence was safer than defiance, but something in her refused to break completely. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the memory of her mother's face, her sister's dreams. Maybe it was just the basic human refusal to accept a cage. She started paying attention to the guards' routines, to the moments when surveillance slipped, to the small gaps in Faisal's control. Amara noticed. One night, while they cleaned the kitchen after dinner, she leaned close to Priya. You're planning something. It wasn't a question. Priya didn't deny it. The guards changed shifts on Thursday nights, Amara whispered. 11 p.m. For about 15 minutes, the east side of the compound isn't watched. The camera has a blind spot near the service gate. How do you know? Priya asked. Because I've been watching for 2 years, Amara said, waiting for the right moment, the right person to try it with. Why haven't you gone alone? Because alone, I'd fail. But 2 of us, we might have a chance. They looked at each other in the dim kitchen, 2 women from different worlds bound by the same nightmare. If we get caught, Priya started. We won't be any worse off than we are now, Amara finished. That night, lying in her locked room, Priya made a decision. She would not stay. She would not accept this. She would risk everything for even the smallest chance of freedom. Because the alternative was becoming one of the hollow-eyed women at the breakfast table. The ones who'd stopped fighting, stopped hoping, stopped believing they deserved anything more than survival. And Priya wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. Planning an escape required patience. Priya didn't know she had. Every day felt like a year. Every hour stretched into something unbearable. But she forced herself to move slowly, to observe carefully, to memorize every detail that might matter when the moment came. Amara taught her how to watch without appearing to watch. How to map the compound in her mind. How to count seconds and anticipate movements. They had one chance. maybe less than that. If they failed, there would be no second attempt. Thursday became their target, 4 days away, then 3, then 2. They couldn't tell the other women, not because they didn't trust them, but because the fewer people who knew, the safer everyone was. If Faisal suspected something, he'd lock down the entire compound. He'd done it before, Mara said, when he sensed unrest. Days of isolation, reduced food, interrogations. They couldn't risk it. So they went through their routines like nothing had changed. Priya cleaned and cooked and served. Amara folded laundry and scrubbed bathrooms. They barely spoke to each other during the day, but at night, in stolen moments, they refined their plan. The east service gate was their exit point. It was used for deliveries and waste removal, locked but accessible from the inside with a bolt mechanism. The camera covering it had a blind spot caused by an overgrown tree branch that Faisal had never bothered to trim. During the shift change on Thursday nights, the guards rotated positions. The old shift left their posts before the new shift fully assumed them. 15 minutes, maybe less. That was their window. They'd slip out during that gap, scale the outer wall using a maintenance ladder stored near the gate, and run. Where? They didn't know yet. The main highway was several kilometers away through empty desert. But anywhere was better than here. They gathered supplies in secret. A screwdriver Amara pocketed from a toolbox in the garage. Coins Priya found while cleaning, enough for a payphone if they could find one. A map torn from a magazine showing Riyadh's major roads. A bottle of water hidden under Amara's mattress. Small things, pathetic things. But they were all they had. Priya wrote a letter to her mother and sister on a scrap of paper, folded it carefully, and hid it in her pillowcase. If she didn't make it, if something went wrong, maybe someone would find it eventually. Maybe they'd know she'd tried. Faisal's mood shifted on Wednesday. He was quieter than usual, watching the women with an intensity that made Priya's skin crawl. During dinner service, he called her over. "You've been different lately," he said, his eyes searching her face. Quieter, more compliant. "I wonder if you finally accepted your situation." Priya kept her expression neutral. "I'm just doing my work, sir." "Good," he said, "because I'd hate to think you were planning something foolish. Women who cooperate here are treated well. Women who cause problems." He let the sentence hang. Priya nodded and returned to the kitchen, her heart hammering. Did he know? Had someone said something? Or was he just testing her, playing psychological games the way he always did? That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark, listening to the compound sounds. The hum of air conditioning, the distant murmur of guards talking, the occasional car on the road beyond the walls. She thought about her mother, probably lying awake in Mumbai, wondering why Priya hadn't called. She thought about Anjali, maybe telling her friends about her sister's glamorous new job in Riyadh. They had no idea. And if Priya died trying to escape, they might never know what really happened. Faisal would craft some story, an accident, a sudden departure. They'd grieve and move on and never learn the truth. Thursday arrived. Priya moved through the day in a fog of adrenaline and terror. She served breakfast. She cleaned the guest bathrooms. She helped May prepare lunch. Every task felt surreal, like she was watching herself from outside her body. Amara caught her eye once across the dining room and gave the smallest nod. Tonight they were really doing this. The afternoon dragged. Dinner service felt endless. Faisal had guests, 3 men in expensive suits who spoke Arabic and laughed too loudly. Priya served them wine and appetizers, her hands steady even though her insides were liquid fear. The men barely looked at her. She was furniture to them. Invisible. Good. After dinner, the women cleaned the kitchen in silence. May sensed something but didn't ask. The Ethiopian woman, Sarah, touched Priya's shoulder briefly as she passed. A small gesture. Solidarity or goodbye. Priya wasn't sure. By 10 p.m., everyone was back in their rooms. Priya heard the locks click one by one. She lay on her bed fully clothed, wearing the darkest thing she owned, black pants, navy shirt. She'd tied her hair back tightly. She put the coins in her pocket along with the map. She waited. At 10:40, she heard a soft knock. The lock on her door clicked open. Amara stood there, breathing hard. "How did you?" "Stole a key 2 months ago," Amara whispered. "Come on." They moved through the hallway like ghosts. The compound was quiet, but not silent. Guards patrolled the grounds on irregular schedules. They had to time this perfectly. They reached the service area at the back of the main house. The east gate was visible through a window. One guard stood near it, checking his phone. They waited. Minutes ticked by. Priya's legs ached from standing so still. Then, at exactly 11 p.m., the guard's radio crackled. He responded and walked away, heading toward the front of the compound. The shift change was starting. They slipped outside. The night air was cool and dry. A half moon provided just enough light to see by. They moved along the wall, staying in shadows, until they reached the service gate. The camera above them pointed toward the driveway, its angle missing the area where they stood. Amara worked the bolt. It was stiff, unused. Priya kept watch, her heart beating so hard she thought it might be audible. The bolt gave way with a soft click. The gate opened. Beyond it was the outer wall, 3 meters high, topped with decorative spikes, and next to it, the maintenance ladder. They climbed. Priya went first, her hands slippery with sweat. The ladder creaked but held. She reached the top of the wall and carefully maneuvered around the spikes. On the other side was darkness and freedom and terror. She lowered herself down, hanging from the wall's edge, and dropped. The impact jarred her ankles, but she stayed upright. Amara followed, faster and more practiced. They were over. They were out. They ran. The desert stretched around them, vast and empty. They headed away from the compound, toward where they thought the highway might be. There were no lights, no landmarks, just sand and scrub brush and the sound of their breathing. Priya's lungs burned. She'd never run like this, full sprint in the dark, adrenaline overriding exhaustion. Behind them they heard shouting. Faisal's guards had discovered they were gone. Beams of flashlights cut through the darkness. The sound of engines starting. They ran harder. Amara grabbed Priya's arm and pulled her toward a construction site, an abandoned half-built structure surrounded by equipment and debris. They ducked behind a concrete barrier just as headlights swept across the area, multiple vehicles searching the roads. The women pressed themselves flat against the ground, barely breathing. A truck passed within meters of where they hid. They waited until the sound faded, then moved deeper into the construction site, finding a dark corner behind stacked cinder blocks. They stayed there through the night. Priya shivered despite the warmth. Amara kept watch, her body tense, ready to run again if needed. The vehicles circled for hours. Voices called out in Arabic. At one point, guards were close enough that Priya could hear their footsteps, but they didn't search the construction site thoroughly. Maybe they assumed the women had headed straight for the highway. Maybe they thought 2 foreign women wouldn't last long in the desert. Whatever the reason, eventually the sounds of pursuit faded. Dawn came slowly, the sky shifting from black to gray to pale gold. "We need to move," Amara whispered, "before workers arrive." They emerged from hiding, covered in dust and sand. In the growing light, they could see the highway in the distance, a dark ribbon cutting through the landscape. It was farther than they'd thought, at least 5 kilometers. They walked, staying off the main paths, moving parallel to the road but not on it. Priya's feet blistered. Her throat was dry despite the water they'd rationed carefully. But she didn't stop, couldn't stop. By mid-morning, they reached a gas station on the highway's edge. It was small and run down, serving truck drivers and travelers. Amara and Priya looked at each other, 2 desperate women with no papers and no options. They had to risk it. They approached the station carefully. Inside, a man stood behind the counter, middle-aged and weathered. Priya stepped forward, her Arabic broken and minimal. "Please, help. We need phone." The man looked at them suspiciously. "You have money?" Priya showed him the coins. "Not enough for a proper call." He shook his head. Amara spoke then, in English, her voice shaking. "We've been held against our will. Trafficked, please. We just need to call our embassies, please." Something in her desperation must have reached him, or maybe he'd heard stories like theirs before. He studied them for a long moment, then gestured to a payphone on the wall. "Quick, before police come." Priya dialed the Indian embassy number she'd memorized before leaving Mumbai, praying someone would answer. The phone rang, and rang, then a voice. "Indian Embassy, Riyadh. How may I help you?" Priya's voice broke. "My name is Priya Sharma. I'm an Indian citizen. I've been trafficked and held at a compound outside Riyadh. Please, I need help." The voice on the other end sharpened. "Where are you now?" Priya described the gas station, reading the Arabic signage to the embassy worker. "Stay there. Don't move. We're sending someone." The call ended. Priya looked at Amara. "They're coming." Amara nodded, tears streaming down her face. They sat outside the gas station, in the thin shade of an awning, and waited. The embassy car arrived within an hour. 2 officials, a man and a woman, both Indian. They approached carefully. "Priya Sharma?" Priya stood on shaking legs. "Yes, and this is Amara. She's Kenyan. She helped me escape." The officials wrapped blankets around them, gave them water, asked gentle questions. Priya told them everything. Faisal's name, the compound's location, the other women still trapped there, the false job offers and debt bondage and locked doors. The female official made calls as they drove. Priya heard phrases. Multiple victims. Immediate intervention. Contact Kenyan embassy. The investigation moved faster than Priya expected. Faisal's name triggered recognition. He'd been reported before by other escapees, but investigations had stalled due to his wealth and connections. This time, with fresh testimony and international pressure from multiple embassies, local authorities had no choice but to act. Within 2 days, the compound was raided. Priya didn't see it happen. She was in protective custody at the embassy, giving statements, meeting with investigators, speaking to lawyers. But she heard about it. The 4 women still inside were freed. Faisal was arrested. Evidence was seized. Computers, documents, phones. Everything that proved what he'd done. The legal process would take months, maybe years. Faisal's lawyers were already building his defense, claiming the women had entered into contracts willingly, that any restraint was for their own protection in a foreign country. But the evidence was overwhelming. The locked doors, the confiscated passports, the monitored communications, the testimony of 6 women from different countries telling identical stories. Priya returned to Mumbai 3 weeks later. The embassy arranged her flight. Emergency travel documents replaced her stolen passport. She landed in the early morning, and her mother and Anjali were waiting at arrivals. They saw her and ran. All 3 of them collapsed into each other, crying so hard they couldn't speak. Home felt wrong at first. Too loud, too crowded. Priya jumped at sudden sounds. She couldn't sleep in rooms with locked doors. She woke up gasping, thinking she was still in the compound. Her mother held her through the panic attacks. Anjali stopped asking questions when Priya couldn't answer. The family didn't talk about the money she'd promised, the debts still unpaid, the dreams that had turned into nightmares. They just focused on having her alive. Priya found a therapist who specialized in trauma. The sessions were painful, excavating everything she'd survived. But slowly, she began to process it, to understand that what happened wasn't her fault. The predators like Faisal built systems specifically designed to bypass suspicion. That wanting a better life didn't make her naive, it made her human. 6 months after her return, she connected with an NGO that fought human trafficking and forced labor. They asked if she'd be willing to share her story, to help train others to recognize the warning signs. Priya said yes. Speaking about it was terrifying, but it was also powerful. Every time she told her story, she took back a piece of what Faisal had stolen. She started a support group for trafficking survivors, women from different backgrounds, different countries, different circumstances, but all carrying the same weight, the shame, the fear, the anger. Together, they learned that survival wasn't weakness. It was the beginning of something stronger. A year after her escape, Priya received an email from a young woman in Bangladesh. She'd seen Priya's story online and had a question. She'd been offered a job in Dubai, personal assistant to a businessman. Incredible salary, all expenses paid. The contract looked legitimate. The recruiter seemed professional. But something felt off. Should she take it? Priya stared at the email for a long time. She thought about the girl she'd been, the one who'd opened that message from a fake prince and seen only opportunity. She thought about Amara and May and Sarah and all the other women still trapped in compounds and houses and situations that stole their freedom while promising them everything. She typed her response carefully, detailed every red flag, explained how traffickers operate, gave resources for verification, offered to connect the woman with organizations that could investigate the offer. She ended with this: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And know that wanting more for yourself and your family is not a crime. But the people who exploit that want are criminals. Don't let them steal your story before you've had a chance to write it yourself. She hit send and sat back. One person. Maybe she'd just saved one person. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Priya still thought about the compound sometimes. The frescoed ceilings in her imagination had become that sterile, beautiful house. The promise of luxury had become bars on windows. But she also thought about Amara running beside her in the dark, about the gas station attendant who let them use the phone, about the embassy officials who believed them, about her mother's arms and her sister's tears, and the therapist who taught her that healing wasn't linear. She thought about all of it, and she kept moving forward. The dream that had nearly destroyed her had taught her something essential, that the world was full of people who saw others as commodities, as opportunities, as objects to be collected and controlled, and the only way to fight that was to refuse, to stay loud, to remain fully, messily, defiantly human, to exist in the world not as someone's possession but as yourself, scarred and angry and healing and alive. Every single day was an act of rebellion against everything Faisal tried to make her believe about her worth. And Priya chose rebellion. She chose survival. She chose to turn her nightmare into a warning, her cage into a weapon, her silence into a voice that might reach the next girl staring at an impossible offer on her screen. And maybe, just maybe, that voice would be enough to make her pause, to question, to walk away before the trap closed. That was the only dream worth chasing now.